right. And guess what? Today I get to introduce our guest speaker. And I just met her recently through a couple of events and organizations and agencies that we have in common. So I am excited to introduce Heather Harlan. Heather has combined her talents as a speech and drama major with her lifelong passion for health when she discovered a position as a prevention specialist. Her broad experiences in mental health include serving as a Phoenix Programs Treatment Center project director for a federal SAMHSA adolescent treatment grant, treatment engagement specialist, alcohol and drug counselor, and work with the Justice Reinvestment Program for high-risk ex-offenders. Following several years with the MU Department of Psychiatry's Missouri Child Psychiatry Access Project, Heather is now with the Columbia Boone County Public Health and Human Services Department, serving in the Health Promotion and Education Unit. Heather volunteers as a facilitator with the NAMI support group in Columbia, and she performs as a professional storyteller across the regions. So Heather, welcome, and I will let you talk a little bit more about your presentation. So welcome, Heather.
Great to be here today. Thank you so much. I love ParentLink. I also, as we get started, want to just express my deep admiration for all of you on this call that are doing. You were handed challenges for which you did not sign up. Perhaps life handed it to you for a variety of reasons. Thank you for all you are doing. I'd encourage you, if you have a chance, to grab a pen and paper. There may be an idea or two or a resource to jot down. Feel free to take a picture of the screen. I know we'll have the slides to share also, but sometimes if we jot things down, we're just more likely to remember them, even if we never look at the notes again. All right, we're gonna, as I said, I'm gonna kind of gallop through this. I titled it Search for the Adolescent Brain. I didn't put the subtitle, which many of us think because we were all adolescents. Yes, they have them, all right? So we're gonna explore a little bit more about why that's the situation. And thank you again so much for being with us today. All right, so our learning objectives today are to identify neurological discoveries in the brains of adolescents. Yes, they have them. To understand needs and vulnerabilities of adolescents as a special population. They aren't just adults that don't have gray hair, all right? There's a lot more that's going on that's pretty dramatic with them. And finally, we're gonna take a few minutes to learn a new way to encourage and affirm children and youth. It also works with adults. So hang on, we're going to gallop through this information, and I hope there's something beneficial for you today. It's information that tremendously excites me. Okay, so to identify neurological discoveries of the brains of adolescents. So what's different about teenagers? Well, we used to think not so long ago, it was just hair, hormones, and pimples, right? It was a lot of teen angst going on. We did not connect the astounding and often irritating changes in behavior, appetite, attention span, poor judgment, risky behaviors, and sleep patterns to their brains. So we just kind of lumped it all in. It's all hormones. In 1997, this story fascinates me. There was a neurologist, Dr. Jay Geed, with the National Institute of Health. He routinely was doing brain scans, sending off information somewhere in Canada where they would tidy up his data and send it back. So he did that. He was scanning the brains of adolescents. He sent the data off and it came back. He looked at it and said, this cannot be right. He sent it to them again. They sent it back. He said, this cannot be right. There's a mistake. He sent it back a third time, 3 times. He sent back the information because it was so radically different what he was expecting to see. What did he see? Because I'm not a numbers person, okay? But what he saw was in teenagers, which he did not expect to see, was neurological exuberance. Okay, so what is that? Well, to get a little, not really much technical, but a little bit, to help understand how human brains develop. Human babies are born with all the parts of the brain that they need, but they're not wired together. So during the first year of life, as you see that amazing thing from a baby born who can't even scratch its own head or roll over, rise up, become a walking toddler beginning to talk, there's a lot of connection of those parts of the brain. During the first year of life, the number of synapses in the brain of an infant grows by tenfold. There are parts of the brain, as I said, that are getting connected and wired together. And then by age 2 or 3 years old, the infant has about 15,000 connections per neuron. It is explosive. And what scientists used to think was that's the only time it happens, those early years, and then it's done. Well, what they see now is a couple of things. Number one, they see there's a second chapter of exuberance a little bit later around junior high. And then, hang on to your seats, something radically happens at age 11 for girls and age 12 for boys. The brain begins to systematically kill off brain connections. It begins to those connections. Some of those connections thrive and survive. Those are the connections that are most often used. The ones that aren't used get pruned. And you see this. It is sort of the use it or lose it. It enables specialization with our brains. So we all know children learn foreign languages much easier when they're small than when they're even in the middle of their teen years, and definitely not as a grandparent, right? So it's make a leaner, meaner learning machine. So it enables a specialization. So it's as though the brain decides, by age 11, this is where you're going to be. You need to adapt to this environment. The things that you're doing over and over, those are the behaviors you need. So the neurological connections are strengthened by use or weakened by not being used. All right, so those are the neurological discoveries about the young brains. And we're going to expound on that a little bit to understand, as a result of that, the needs and vulnerabilities of adolescents as a special population. So the human brain continues growing or sort of getting wired, maturing until about what age? Ponder that. Perhaps some of you know that. Yay if you do. Just think about that. About what age? How long? It's actually, again, one of the things they discovered with the human brain is growing and maturing and getting connected well into the mid-20s, about age 25. I've seen research say it may be 30. And also really the neuroplasticity of getting new connection continues lifelong, but it's at a slower pace. But that more intense rate where things are coming together to get wired together happens until the mid-20s. So you can see here on the slide that the blue areas are the more connected areas, and that continues through a lifelong process into the mid-20s. It's just not all hooked up yet. So it's interesting to me that the car rental industry, you know how you have to be to rent a car? 25. They were looking at the neurology of human development. They looked at the numbers and said, some seems to happen when people are 25. There are a lot fewer accidents. We are not renting people cars till they're 25. I don't care if you drove a tank, buddy. You can't rent a car till you're 25. And this is, now we understand, this is the reason why. Okay, the human brain matures from the inside out to the front to the back. Inside out, front to the back. Just think about that, from the inside out to the front, or from the back to the front. So the last part of the brain to develop is called the prefrontal cortex. And if you would humor me, if you just use your hand and put it right here over your eyes, that's the prefrontal cortex. You can say out loud where you are if you can, prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex. A short quiz at the end. So that's all right, thank you. So why does that matter that the prefrontal cortex is the last to develop? Well, the prefrontal cortex in humans is the last to mature, and that is the part of the brain where these things are housed: reasoning, motivation, judgment, and the ability to resist impulses. Oh, are those areas, reasoning, motivation, judgment, impulses, things that teenagers are especially skilled? Is that their strength? We would say no. Here's why. The prefrontal cortex in humans sort of serves as a police officer. the chief executive. It helps us plan ahead and asks what might happen if, what might happen if, what might happen if I don't study for the test, what might happen if I go out for track, what might happen if I try some music, what might happen if I try to race the train across the track, what might happen if I call an adult in my life stupid, what might happen if, all right? So your team's thinking and behavior process is complicated. It is not wrinkle-free because there's all this connectivity and pruning process going on. So we need to, although we want to expect great and positive things from our teens, expect inconsistency. You may have a young person where you think my teen would never do that. And they're the most reliable, smart, considerate, kind person that you know. And the next they do something so dangerous and inconsiderate, you can hardly believe it's the same person. I have a phrase I use a lot, age appropriate. So expect inconsistency. Don't be surprised by inconsistency. Now, there's a part of our brain that if you watch just for a moment, pay attention carefully on the screen. Now watch very carefully. Now, as you were watching me, usually with my group of people, I'm a lot more all over the room. But if you were watching, your brain, the neural pathways in your brain were firing exactly the same way mine did when I picked up the water bottle, took off the lid, took a drink, and waved at you. Exactly the same. Those are called mirror neurons. So when we see something as humans, we have mirror neurons because that connects us, that we're sharing that experience in a way. So those are called, and that's why we enjoy sports. If we watch sports, we're kind of connecting by watching it. So it's the part, but the part of the brain that inhibits that is the last to mature, that prefrontal cortex. So we're not going around imitating everybody all the time. But you know, if you have a 2-year-old and you're jumping up and down, what's the 2-year-old going to do? Jump up and down. If you're clapping and laughing, what's the 2-year-old going to do? Clap and laugh. If you use dirty words, what's the 2-year-old going to do? Use dirty words. They are hardwired to imitate. That's what they need to do to learn everything they need to learn. But the inhibitor neurons are part of the prefrontal cortex, so that we're taking in other people's actions, but we're not automatically imitating them. And older folks that automatically imitate everything usually have some other neurological issue going on. That part of the brain matures about age 25. So 2 things we thought we knew about brain development: that adolescent brains are done maturing in teen years. Nope, we were wrong about that. They're not. That, you know, when you see that like 12-year-old go to a 16-year-old and there's really dramatic changes, it's interesting because I go to the gym most mornings and there's a dad and he has a couple of boys, like he had 2 or 3 boys that he would bring in. I don't know if they're all his or neighborhood, like he had his own personal basketball camp every day. And then, so I wasn't really at the gym hardly at all. I quit my membership for a couple of years. So I've been coming back, and now those guys are like up past their dad's shoulder just in a couple of years. So we've seen the dramatic physical changes for them. We didn't understand there are equally dramatic neurological things that are happening for them as well. So we were wrong. We thought that they were done maturing, you know, kind of, if you're as tall as I am, your brain's done too. No, we were wrong. The other thing is, just I wanted to let you know, is that we thought that an adolescent's IQ was set in stone. No, you're wrong about that. So if a child has a test, some sort of an IQ test, that can be changed. It can be raised sometimes by as much as 10 points. I can't remember the numbers on that, but that research came out in 2011, about 10 years ago. And that was really radical. They see what they see is a change in more structured learning environments, that a child's IQ can actually get higher. It's not written in stone. So just keep that in mind if you're concerned about your kiddos, and that there's still opportunities for them to take in more information and sort of get smarter. Okay. so, so adolescence is not set in stone. The IQ seems to be a gauge of acquired knowledge. Now, again, it progresses in fits and starts. Nothing about this process is smooth or wrinkle free. Keep that in mind. It's not like this straight line progression. It's up and down. It's kind of all over the map because, as I said, there's this connectivity going on and pruning all at the same time. To make the decision, the brain sort of makes a decision. We're going to keep this connection, but we're not going to keep that one. So a lot of folks, then with those two things that I shared, the idea the brain is still growing and that the IQ is not set in stone, or something most people would say to me, I did not know that. So those are important pieces of information to keep in mind as you're looking at environments, responses, guidance techniques for your teenagers. And I will tell you generally, how do I put this? It's not really, teenagers feel insulted if you tell them your brain isn't done growing. so I would encourage you to think about, you need to know that, so that when there are policies or certain give and take relationships going, contingency, if you do this, then this, keep in mind, avoid backing yourself into a corner where you have to implicitly trust the teenager because you're putting the onus on them and their brain isn't built to carry it yet. You may not, again, you may not want to tell them, well, I'm not going to trust you with that because your brain's not done growing. That's insulting to them. But for us to know it's still growing, we know a 4-year-old should not be trusted to cross the street. Why? Because a 4-year-old cannot take in all that information neurologically to make a judgment. Think of your teenagers that way. It's not that they wouldn't mean to, but there's so much going on, it's more than they're going to be able to take in. So just keep that in mind. So in other words, teen brains are changing in even more ways than we know. Now, what's the one thing? The one thing the adolescent brain is best designed to do. This is really important to understand. One thing, they're primed at the starting block, ready for this. They are fueled up, ready to launch this one thing. What is it? They're geared up, revving to go. The one thing. Are you ready? You heard it here first. Learn. Everything neurologically that is going on in that brain is pushing towards learning to get everything wired up, connected, so that teenage brain can take in the information it needs to survive without you. So we want to support that process because that's our goal, is that they can survive as an individual and as the species. So to learn. Neurologically, learning is the process of developing effective neural pathways. That's kind of getting that brain all connected in ways that work. So this happens to reinforcers, neurotransmitters, make it possible for us to learn. Excuse me, what is a reinforcer? What's a neurotransmitter? Well, a reinforcer is a positive reward that increases the likelihood that a behavior will be repeated, and it's a positive reinforcer. Now, you may think of that maybe as an outside. Think about the brain, how the brain rewards us internally already. That's built in for our survival. If I'm thirsty and I get a drink of water, I feel better. That's a small chemical reward on the brain. I make the effort, I get a drink of water, reward. It has my attention, I will do that again. When I am hungry and I eat something, I feel a little better. Now, it has my attention, I will do that again. If I need some sleep, get a good night's sleep, I feel better, I will remember that. I will, if I move, that's why we feel better when we take a walk, because we are rewarded to move, because the survival of our ancestors, prehistoric ancestors, depended on moving, not staying in one place. So if you move, you're more likely to survive. If you solve a problem, you know, that little light bulb moment, that's a real thing. That's the chemical reward of like, oh, just that little spark. So positive rewards make it more likely that a behavior is going to be repeated. And those are the things that we want to think about as we encourage teenagers, how we can create those little sparks and avoid rewards that are too big that take them the wrong direction. So positive reinforce increases the likelihood a behavior will be repeated. So sometimes we add to that, you know, hey, let's get this done by, let's get the yard raked by 2 o'clock and we'll get ice cream, right? So a negative response that increases the likelihood of behavior will diminish or stop. In the brain, it comes in the form of chemical rewards. Those are the neurotransmitters. So those things like serotonin, dopamine, those sorts of things, neurologically, physically, those are very expensive, if you will, chemicals. So your body's very careful with how it uses them. So anything that messes with those is pretty serious. So what do youth need to learn? Well, they need to learn skill sets. Skill sets. So when I ask people sometimes, so what do you have to learn to ride a bike? Well, keep your balance. Well, that's one thing. What else do you need to do? Well, you need to figure out how to turn corners. You need to figure out how to put the brakes on. When I didn't learn that, I ran into a clothesline pole. Okay, so that probably explains a lot. But they have to keep the pedals going. How do you work the brakes? How do you turn? How do you signal? If you're on the streets, you have to learn how to maneuver traffic. There are a lot of things you have to learn to ride a bicycle. It is not one thing. So doing all that all at once, where you sort of adding layers, different electrical lines, if you think of it that way, think of it as one electrical line, and then you keep adding till it becomes a cable with a bunch of wires. If you want to write anything down today, a good thing is neurons fired together are wired together. As we encourage them to do that one behavior and you add in more things that we reinforce, that one little electrical line becomes a cable in the brain, it's more likely to survive the pruning process. It becomes thicker and stronger. So just to call to your attention, drug abuse starts early and peaks in the teen years. 90% of addictions begin before age of 18. Young brains are more vulnerable. Probably the most effective strategy we have discovered is delay. The longer you can postpone any young person using any addictive substance, the less likely they are to have substance use issues. Age of first use matters. Youth who begin drinking before the age of 15 are 4 times more likely to become alcohol dependent than those who wait till they're 21. Adolescents are more vulnerable, so they're a special population. They don't have strong neural pathways developed with pro-social enforcements that require effort. The substances, again, provide a really strong, powerful, they don't have to do anything. They just reward in their brains. So they want to ignore those little rewards. They can't compete. So they aren't able to develop, think through the consequence of putting the onus on them. Just say no, that's why that's not effective, because we put it on them. And then the transition, stress, mental illness make the brain more vulnerable. So just saying stop or don't is not an effective learning strategy. They don't help. That just keeps you revving your engine. It doesn't help them learn what to do. So now we're going to look at a new way to encourage youth, children, and adults too, to learn. All right. So what's rewarded gets repeated. You might write that down too. What's rewarded gets repeated. The principle behind all learning. That's the only reason we repeat anything, is it's been rewarded. So we want to reward positive actions that will develop skill sets. So think back to when somebody praised you. What were your thoughts? Maybe I'm going to give you some examples. Somebody told me, you're a great cook. Oh, you're such a good athlete. That's really good. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Now, here's what was going on in my head. Maybe it's not what was going on in your head, but somebody said I was a great cook. I was thinking to myself, I just dumped a can of soup over the chicken. I'm not a great cook. So my inner thoughts that I'm carrying are rejecting that affirmation. It's not congruent with my experience. Even though their intentions are good, I didn't get the message. Oh, you are so smart. I guessed at the answer, I'm not really that smart. That's in my head. That's the message I'm telling myself. I'm not that smart. I refuted the offer that they just tried to give me. Then they say, you're a great athlete. I'm going, that's a lucky play. I am not good. That's what I'm hearing in my head. And sometimes when people say, I'm proud of you, sometimes I see people I haven't seen in decades, and they say, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, I'm thinking, you didn't have anything to do with that. How do I feel about my accomplishment? To give me permission that I am proud of me? What am I thinking about my accomplishments? Because that's the one I'm carrying around with me, right? So how do we encourage a child without questioning the affirmation, trying to prove we are wrong? You ever have a child, that little Johnny's been so good, and within 2 minutes, the child is acting out? We've all seen that because they want to prove to us you're wrong. This is the message in my head. So try this. Instead of adding a value judgment or saying good, try describing. Try describing. Describe what you see. Describe how you feel. So let's say the child brings home a drawing for you to admire. Here's one I did. So you look at it. Now, traditionally, we might say, oh, it's beautiful, or what is it, or tell me about it. Another approach might be to look at it intently, give it attention because the child is asking for your attention, and describe what you see. Because maybe the child doesn't even know what it is. I see bright streaks of yellow, pink that goes around and around, some swishy back blue and some dots of blue. That picture makes me feel so cheerful. I didn't say it was good. I don't need to know what it is. I described what I saw, and I described how I felt. So what if a gift doesn't turn out that well? What could you say if a child gives you something like this? You can still look at it and say, you must have worked so hard to make this. The blue and the brown complement each other. I feel so special that you made this for me. I will feel warm when I wear it. You never said it was good. You never said it was beautiful. Describe what you see and how you feel. So if a child performs at a school program that maybe wasn't all that outstanding, you can still describe their effort. You know, you stood up there, you worked so hard to learn the words to that song. What if they complete a chore, sort of? My tendency, I will confess, is to say, well, yeah, you raked the yard, but you missed, approximation is a difficult thing for me, but to affirm and notice and give weight to what they did right. That patch of the yard, I can see so much. It's been cleared out. That just helps so much. I was so tired when I came home from work, and having help with the raking is very helpful. Period. Put a period at the end of the sentence, not but. Why don't you? I was so tired last night. Thank you for emptying the trash. But you should have put a trash bag in, right? So put a period. Thank you so much. It was very helpful. Maybe you address the trash bag issue later. So, and then when we say I'm proud of you, think about adding to that a message they can carry around instead of being dependent on outward affirmation. You can be proud of yourself. I know how hard you worked for this. You earned it. No one deserves this more than you do. You're really inspiring. I'm impressed. You kept at it. I admire your perseverance. You can be proud of yourself. That gives them permission. When you are around, they can say, I am proud of myself. If you forget and say good or you're great, just add the description. All right? So I hope you'll try that. It can be very powerful. You can use it also sort of a little bit. You might say, I see a lunch on the table when they need to remember their lunch. I see the trash needs to be empty. You're not using a name. You're not accusing anybody. You're just observing. You can also use it that way. So we've come to the end. Just real quickly, I want you to think through, review. The last part of the brain to fully mature is the prefrontal cortex. Human brains do not fully mature until about what age? This is approximate. All right, mid-20s. Yep. And then instead of telling a child their accomplishments are good, try describing what two things? What you see and how you feel. All right. Thanks. Any questions?
Angie said that when you were talking about what are teenagers ready to do, what are they ready for right now, and you said learn, and she said eat, which I can totally relate to because I also have had teenage boys in my house, and our refrigerator could not be stocked fast enough. So.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of that, if you think of a lot of that energy is going for brain development, not just those muscles and those bones, but a lot of it, a huge, your brain is about 3 pounds and still uses 20% of your body energy. So the brain is like an electrical machine that saps a lot of energy. So being sure they've got adequate healthy snacks and good stuff is a good thing. And I will say, just being able to make that available. And questions or comments, any situations where you think, well, if my child does this, how would I comment a different way to that?
Heather, I have a question.
Sure.
What is your recommendation on how to help teenagers? I don't know if interpret is the right word, or just kind of deal with, comments, negative comments or things that peers might say, whether they're kidding or whether, they're being serious. Sometimes it's hard to kind of tease those things apart. And especially with boys, I know that a lot of, it seems like anyway, a lot of the interaction is just like, rousing and negative teasing and stuff. But what is your advice about how to help kids?
Well, I'm not a psychologist. I've done drug and alcohol treatment for teenagers, but here's some ideas that come to mind. First of all, listen and identify, give their feelings a name. We want to hurry and fix their discomfort, but be with them in the discomfort instead of we want to fix it, to be able to say, so, and that's a hurtful, sounds like that really bothered you. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out, deep thing, but say, sounds like that really bothered you. And they might say yes or no. They go, no, not really, they'll tell you. And then to listen, it's a little more, and then you might ask, do you think that's true? To help them with their internal messages, do you think that's true? And if they say yes, usually it's a mixed bag. The reason things bother us is because there's a little bit of truth in it, right? If that were never true, it'd be easier, but there's a little bit of truth in it. So they might say yes or no, but if they say no, you might ask, well, what are some reasons you think that's not true? So you're helping them create their own mental scrapbook to go to be able to sort of like the duck, rub oil on your back, on your wings. It takes effort, but to be able to go, that's not true. And to be able to say, sometimes I've seen that is true, but generally I remember this and this, this, and you describe, you give them pictures. You don't say, nonsense, that's not true. You describe, give them concrete examples that they can store away to refute that. Does that make sense? But I think most important is to say, and then ask them, what do you think you'll do about it? And kind of maybe go from there. There's going to be a post, I can't remember what date it was, but a great thing with the Boone Danube Public Library on social media and its effect on teens. Check on that if you're in the Columbia area, because I think they found somebody who would talk about bullying and that on social media. Thanks. That was a question. Yes, go ahead.
Angie said that was a great suggestion and she thanks you. And then our April, our ParentLink family specialist and early childhood specialist, I hope I got that right, April, has a question.
You did, Yvette. Heather, good to see you. Thank you so much for all of this. This is so lovely. So I had a question kind of along the lines of Angie's in regards to peers. So like, what advice do you have when teens come home? And, I have raised 2 young adults myself and went through the teenage years. And I've noticed that some teens either have, they're either leaders or followers a little bit. You can kind of see their temperaments and everything. So what do you suggest for those of us on here who've had or are experiencing current teenagers who are more of a follower, like, and those concerns that, come home? What do you suggest when you know that their brains are still developing and they tend to think that their friends' ideas are just amazing, but that they're not the greatest ideas? Do you have any advice for that scenario? How to navigate that?
Because remember, what's this called? The prefrontal cortex is the last developed. you have to be the prefrontal cortex.
Mhm.
So number one is being with them, helping them give their emotions a name. When I did drug and alcohol counseling, my adult clients could be mad, sad, or glad. That was it. They did not have a vocabulary for emotions. And you can look online and find lists of emotions, print it out, put it on your fridge, and then begin modeling using it. You know, I'm feeling neighborly today. I'm going to take those extra tomatoes over to Mr. Gardner or something, you know. So, but use it, model behavior, to say out loud, you know, my friend Millie is generally pretty fun, but sometimes she just wants to do stuff I don't want to do. And I think she called last night. I told her I'd call her back. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to, you know, so you model the discomfort of saying no to a friend.
Yeah, that's great. So modeling boundaries and things like that. And again, a lot of things we do the same, we use the same techniques for early childhood.
And then also looking at problem solving. I'm going to put the name of a book. Let's see, just a minute. There's a book that just was on my all-time favorite. I loved it because it had cartoons. Okay, because I love cartoons. So cartoons to help us figure out a different approach to parent, how to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk. And there's a great chapter on problem solving. When I did that with the adult, that was a big part of what we do, to sit down and let them. So sounds like Jimmy keeps wanting you to do thus and such. But what I'm hearing is you're thinking this. And in the past, this is what's happened. Yeah. Okay. What do you think you'll do? See, you're the prefrontal cortex, and begin to problem solve. And they go, well, I'm telling no. And again, all ideas are possible. Generate a bunch of ideas. Help them come up with an idea. Make it more specific. Then I'll say, you know, actually, I don't want to, or could you come up with a little instead, or help them come up with an idea for a plan, and then see how it goes. But you're the prefrontal cortex, because we do that as adults.
Mm-hmm.
So option 3, you know, we push the button and we do it. Well, they're like, you don't even know how to do it. It's like Jimmy says it. So Jimmy's my prefrontal cortex.
Right.
Problem solving. And the first thing, if you don't know, it's always the right answer is be with them. Give it a name. All feelings are acceptable. And I learned this from that book, and it shook my world, because that wasn't the way I was raised. And I had lovely parents, but all feelings are acceptable. Certain actions must be limited.
I love that, Heather. Thank you so much. And, you know, one thing I always tried to keep in mind too is to thank them for talking with you, because some of this stuff is really difficult. And I love it when they, you know, when kiddos, and I have suggested for other parents, it's almost like a caller coming in from the warm line or the Kin for Kid line. You know, we thank them for calling and reaching out. And I think if you're having those types of difficult conversations, that's amazing. That's worth $1 million.
And I just the name of the book and 3 words that are very useful with adolescents. Oh, bummer, wow.
Yeah.
You can say that sounds hard. I have no solution for this. You just be there and go, wow, bummer. Wow. Oh. One of our adolescent counselors said that was like 90% of her counseling sessions. Oh, bummer, wow. Oh, bummer. What goes down? Oh, bummer, wow. Oh, bummer, wow. Oh, but you're present. You're there with them. And then again, I do reinforcing that. Thank you. This was hard to tell me. Even if there's no solution on the table, but they know you listened, you gave it a name, you were with them. They are not alone in it. You, my friend, are the cortex.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Anybody else?
Heather, we have some folks on the phone, so I'm going to repeat the name of the book just in case.
All right.
How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Faber and Maslish.
Just remember Faber, you can find it. They also have like specialized ones, How to Talk So Teenagers Will Listen, and Listen So Teenagers Will Talk, How to Listen So Students Can Learn. And they have it now for like preschoolers, so they've really expanded on it. But it's so, and it's, how do I say this? It's written by moms. It's not that I don't respect people with a lot of letters after their names, but you want to know it's somebody who's in the trenches with kiddos, and that's been Faber and Maslish, in that they took stuff. I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, this guy. But he said we need this on the ground, boots on the ground type of strategies. Okay.
And one thing I wanted to add when April was kind of reiterating the answer to your question, sometimes they just want a listening ear. They don't really need somebody to fix it. And that's kind of hard for me in my profession and as a mom and as a stepmom. It's, you just, sometimes they just want you to listen. There's no fixing and that's hard. And it's a learned skill for sure.
And I think even just saying, again, I have to remind myself, even when I was doing the counseling, to go, this isn't your life, Heather, but to be able to say, that sounds hard. Do you have any ideas what you might do about it? And then listen, and they go, no, I don't know. Huh, okay. And just leave it there.
Yeah.
Just are willing to put, I think the period at the end of the sentence is the most useful piece of punctuation for parents. God knows I love commas and exclamation points. Questions, then they feel grilled sometimes, but just an old bummer, wow, thank you. A period is probably the most useful piece of punctuation that we have. We need to use it more often.
Well, Heather, thank you so much.